Hi, and welcome to our third episode. What we going today is nearly the same as we have done last time, but only this time it's looking a little bit more like a real game. So, but before we start coding, as always, we going through some little points, like our learning values. And again, these learning values are important to create a space where everyone here can learn. We haven't, to be honest, we haven't much interaction now, so far. But again, this doesn't mean these values or this way of behaving is less important. So never hesitate to ask any question because there are no dumb questions. No one is free of error, including me. So point out to mistakes so everyone can become better. What we're doing here, it's learning. So we're not trying to create the best quiz game ever in the world, the most productive and highly valuable. What we are doing is to learn something. And last but not least, we not try, but um, if we interacting with each other, we acting with respect, having always in mind that each one has an individual learning path and that we can only create a world that's better with us um, if we behave with respect. So reports on last episodes. As always, I getting some numbers together and to see how we performing. And as I always say, we because I believe not still I believe this is a project we can only do together. So what we interesting, he hasn't updated the data. Anyway, so the numbers are correct, not the numbers on the pie chart. So anyway, we had an increase of 9 viewers on Twitch and one on YouTube, which is great. Still no feedback form received and still no discussion, but it's okay. So if we compare what we have done so far with the two episodes, we can see we have an increase in viewership, which is great. Also, views per episode is now a lot higher, while live viewers stay at the same level. Thank you very much for now my live viewer, so I now don't feel alone, which is great. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. And our live count has, which I think, sorry, our view count, which I think it's amazing, has nearly increased by, we have nearly tripled this amount. Sorry, we have nearly tripled this amount, which is, I think, a great achievement. Thank you very much for everyone who's watching, who is supporting, who is sharing with friends. It's a huge help, and I've seeing these becoming more and more with more and more people view it. It's amazing, really. I'm so thankful and I appreciate it a lot. Yeah, okay. So this week was kind of very busy in my in my daily job and also with kids and wife and pandemic and stuff. I really hadn't got much time to go through some introspection and to see what I can improve during the last episodes. There are unfortunately no changes in the way we are doing things, and I also haven't received any feedback so that I can kind of incorporate in the session. Yeah. Anyway, life is how it is, and but we will get better. I deeply believe so. Okay, and again, as the last time said, to build a community, it takes time, and I'm fully aware that everything we are doing here is a long-term goal. And what we have seen, and again, this is amazing, we have seen an increased viewership, which is again very, very great. Um, yeah, amazing. So what we're going today is to make our quiz after we created the shell in the episode before. Now we would like to do it to give them a kind of decent user interface. And I have to admit, because I have to really admit, this entire design thing is not something I'm good at it. I'm far away from being good. And I'm during the conception of BlazQ, I've thought a lot about should I include such an episode or not, because I'm far away from being a web designer and I'm far away from really deeply understanding what all these tiny things we will do soon really mean. Um, but there are two reasons why we are doing it. Firstly, because without these kind of good looking and it would be, I think, less enjoyable to play the game and it would be less enjoyable to share the experience with others. And secondly, because even if we are not good at things, that doesn't should mean or imply that we shouldn't try it. Because if we try, at least we have the possibility to get better. And thirdly, in yeah, mostly it's like most teams don't care if you can do it or not because no one can do it usually because they're web designers. So we have to share this burden and figure our way through. So all what I'm saying is, in this episode, don't expect very, very good explanations because, as I said, I have very superficial knowledge about all of these. But again, I try to make it as fun as possible, and I generally believe we will have fun. So let's get started. I'm switching to my virtual machine, and we go. Okay, and okay, working perfectly. So what I've done so far, I've gone through our repo. I want to copy it. I've created already a fresh directory, and I want to clone our repository. So done. Perfect. Okay, so this time I go into episode 3 finished, and what I want to do is to say .NET run URLs should be. What I like to do when doing this visual stuff is to have a kind of template. I started with a template from a wife, which was like, well, let's say like a picture. So not really a good starting point from the perspective of going fast. So what we doing now is like we creating or we taking the existing application as template, um, and from there we start we going. So here, not really interesting things happen. I'm just starting our application with a .NET Run, and I specify the ports the application should listen. So copy. I opened a new tab, and I'm moving to this side. In the not finished directory, I open VS Code. And let's say I just want to open a file. We open a terminal. We type .NET. I want to restore dependencies. And strong dependencies. And I want to .NET watch. And when files change, execute .NET run. Okay. Taking some time. I want to do it in a new incognito window just to prevent whatever things might be shared between these things. So close these. So just to recall, on the left side, this is where we want to go. Right side is where we are. And yeah, sometimes these kind of comparison can be not be very motivating, but you will see how quickly the right side can become to what we see on the left side. So Blazor as technology hasn't really an own UI system. So in some other languages, for example, in Java or even in C# with WPF, there exist entire frameworks just for user interface. With Blazor, because it's web-based, it uses web technologies. And when it comes to just displaying things, there are two very dominant technologies. This is HTML and CSS, which is you can think about HTML as the structure, of a document when where CSS is how the structure should look like. It's not always 100% distinguishable, but mostly you can think about HTML is structure, CSS is anything you can see. And by manipulating either the structure or CSS or both, we can achieve nearly everything we have in our mind. As I said, nearly because I'm limited by my knowledge, but I've seen people doing amazing things. And I mean, we all have seen people doing amazing things when we're using such services like Netflix. Keep in mind, Netflix, for example, is mostly HTML and CSS layout, which is amazing. Okay, and I've also created today a kind of script for myself to really keep online. As I said, I'm not really confident in these topics, so I need assistance to go through. So let's start with the header. So what is on top of here, I will call header, which we have also here. So first task, it should look like this one. Okay, I open code, VS Code, sorry, I open VS Code. And if you remember correctly, inside the player folder, we had the player details page, which was exactly welcome to BlazQ, welcome to BlazQ, this side. And well, let's start with something which is called a div. A div is, if you, from a structural point of view, it's meaningless. Div has no meaning, which is great because then we can use the entire for styling. Um, what do I mean with meaning? Other things like a label, for example. A label, as you can see on the tooltip, has a special meaning. It is it is used for a special context. So again, where a div is just something we can use. And what I want to do, I want to have div class row. I, let me write and then I will explain. Inside this row, I want to have another div, which should have a column of 4, and another div with a column of 8. Inside this column of 8, I want to have my headline. And inside these, I want to have my image, which should be source, root, because I usually very good in spelling things wrong. I want to have an image. And that's it. So let's start and see what has changed. And always remember, left side is something we want to achieve. Right side is what we actually have. So it's not the same, but we are getting to it. So now it's about explaining what happened here. So, oops, what happened here? Again, div is meaningless, but we using the CSS framework Bootstrap, and Bootstrap defines a lot of so-called classes. In CSS, a class is a collection of different styles or style statements. One of these statements or one of these classes is row, and what row does is every element inside a row will be placed in columns. So from left to right usually. And and Bootstrap has a so-called grid system. With grid system, we have the possibility to place elements. And this grid system consists of rows, which we see in here, and columns. And one row consists of 12 columns. So if we have 4 and 8, which is 12, it's one row. If we would, for example, use 8 and 8, which is 16, I just want to save it to see what happens. We see now we have like 2 rows because it's greater than 12. I'm just changing it back, saving it, and these, and oh, and I forgot. You can also see now the picture has much more space, which is awesome before I change it back. What I've done, give me 1 second, here and here. So I've confused both things. So I had here like a 4 and here an 8. And the result has been like this thing is now 75% of the entire space, and this is only 25%, which is again just another way to explain um, these yeah, percentage of fractions. Okay, and if we have a look at the www root folder, there's a CSS folder or directory, and inside these we have an app CSS file. And in this app CSS file, I've created some classes for us, like background dark purple. And if I apply, again, now we can see what a CSS class is. We have a name, and again, it's a lot more, and I will explain it later. For now, we have a name. And because it's done with a dot, it's a class, or it can be applied to a class on a HTML element. And we have a style statement. And the style statement said background color should be purple. And because purple is not easy to remember for me, or have to specify, I call it dark purple. So we have now row dark purple. And I mean, it's not entirely what we wanted, but at least it's purple. So next thing, what happens if I reducing the size of the screen? So I make it very small, and we see if I'm doing it smaller and smaller and smaller, it's not something which is kind of nice behavior. What would be great if it would like fit into a new line. And as you can see here, this is exactly what happened here. So until a certain point, it goes into a new row. And again, this is one of the great achievements of Bootstrap, having these very flexible um, grid system. This design pattern is called responsive design because the screen responses to different sizes without, without really reloading, just by kind of rearranging the elements. So, and to do so, we say now S should be always like 12, so a new row. But if the column is a medium-sized screen, it should be 4. And if the should be 8. MD, again, is medium. For a medium-sized screen, there are different classes like small and large, and I think also very large nowadays. But before we go into the details, just make sure that we have achieved what we wanted to achieve. Looking good, and breakpoint. Like, I need to find, yeah, okay. If we compare these, there are still some difference. First, it's the text color. It's white. And I want to introduce to a new thing here. Each browser comes with developer tools. I say each browser, I mean, I'm not sure about each, but most browsers come with developer tools, which you can see on this slide. These developer tools give us a great opportunity to just try things instead of recompiling and all other. So I want to have like a white color. So I'm choosing this button to select something. I go into the headline, and what I can do, go into this container. And what I can do now is like text white. Again, this is a class provided by Bootstrap. Now we have these. And if you remember, now we have, I close it. At least color is same. Here's a line break. Line break is also easily achieved by this tag and this tag. So saving. As you can see, the error is just line break. So the result is now a line break, and I forgot to add the text color. I edit in a browser, but not in our file. And as soon as I reload the page or recompile, it's gone. Text color, I mean text white. Yeah, yep. As I said, all these tiny small things, and there will be a lot more during this episode. I have a good feeling. Okay, so achievement. So next thing, this icon is smaller. This picture is smaller than here. If we don't specify anything, usually, in most cases, it will use the full size of the image. So we need to scale it down. And first thing we do. So there's also a class available, so it's called image fluid, which makes it adaptive. And I want to introduce another way to set a style with the style attribute. And now I said like I want to have high of 150 pixel. Okay, despite the possibility to set the style parameters via CSS in a kind of class, we can also set it directly on the element. Sometimes it's easier to read, sometimes we don't want to have a class just for one thing because it will be used only in one spot. There are reasons for using it. In this episode, I try to expose you to a lot of different ways so you can find your own style. And if you see various examples, because all of these things are used in example around the internet, it's good to know that both things having the same or works the same thing. And they not work exactly the same way because there's a kind of hierarchy, which elements are applied at which time. But again, for now, we can say either I can set it via a class or I can set it via a style directly. So icons are finished. Now would be great to have a kind of little bit of space around it. When it comes to space, there are two possibilities. One is margin, the other is padding. Margin would mean I want to have a margin between two elements. Padding would mean I want to have a kind of margin between the start of my element and the first content. This is padding. And there are a lot of different padding classes available. They're starting all with a P. I mean, Bootstrap offers these classes, starting with a P. For example, a P5 would mean I want to have, let's see, applying a P5, P5, and now we have in all directions. Just to make a small example, I zoom onto the screen. I go into a row. Now I said P. We have also like PW, PY, which would only adding padding to top and bottom, or I have only top, or I have only bottom, or X, or anything. And I going back to P5 and P3 would be a little bit less, 2, and so on. So why using 3, 4, 5 instead of actual values? Because it make it, again, my guess, the people designing Bootstrap had said, we don't want to care about pixel because people maybe don't remember the exact pixel amount. But what we can remember is like having a system of constant, um, like a relative system. And this relative system goes from 0 to 5. So P5, we're having already these, which looks, I mean, not exact. Again, we going into this direction step by step, and we have already done something. Okay, next thing we have to do is like it's nearly centered, which is great. Doesn't seem centered, but it's get more obvious here. And I want to show it now using the developer tools instead of coding it in VS Code. So let's start in here. And first with this element. What we can see here inside the tool, this blue thing, the browser shows us the space or the width and height of this element. And we can see that the container has much more space than the actual image. So what we could do, we could add a class. We can say I want to display the flags. And I will explain what flags means in a moment. What I can do now is like I can say align items center and justify content center. Okay. Flags align center. I display justify content center. Okay. Um, flags is the layout system inside HTML or inside CSS. The flag system, we have rows, and we have like one container, and this container have multiple elements, and the elements can arrange via a row or a column. So if we would say flex row would mean all elements are placed inside a row, like we having done with the grid system before. So what it means is we have a main axis and another axis. I forgot the name to be honest. Main axis and I really forgot the name. Give me 1 second. I want to provide you with the correct name. Um, it's main axis and cross axis, I think. Let me check. Yeah, main axis and cross axis. So if we have, that's a good thing. Sometimes I really forget the names. So with this flex layout, if we're saying a row, we have a main axis. The main axis is like is the if you think about the screen, would be the x, the horizontal, while the cross axis is still cross axis is vertical line. And then we can assign elements how they should place in the cross. I forgot it again. It's amazing. Cross axis around the cross axis and the main axis. So by saying justify content, so let's have a look. What does it mean? So we have a row. So these is the main axis. These is the cross axis. And if I'm saying I want to, sorry, justify content center is enough. So we see inside these column, these things should justify itself in the middle of something, and in the middle of the container, because the container takes more space than the image. And justifying content is always along main axis, while aligning is around cross axis. So let me guess something. So we want to place it also vertically in the middle. So I just add something here directly also, like let's say I want to have um, so sorry, cross axis, main axis. I've, so we justify content. Now it's like in the middle of the box because it's in this side. Interestingly, if we making it smaller, it still stays in the middle because it's the same row. Perfect. So justifying content if we want to place it inside the inside the main axis. Aligning items if we want to place it inside the other thing. So as I said, this will be a funny episode because it's like really, I have really trouble explaining it. But I promise the result is worth it. So, and more often we do it also in these episodes, the easier it will become for all of us to understand this concept, especially for me. Anyway, one thing is achieved. The image is centered. Now we want to center our two, and we can try two ways. One way would be doing exactly the same, like display flex, which wouldn't change anything, and just to justify content center would achieve the same thing. So again, we have like this is our entire container. Inside the entire container, we have a heading. So the other way to do the same thing would be to use. So now we can see the header takes the entire space. Because it takes the entire space, we could also say like, and it's text center. So both ways, because it's text, is working the same thing. And knowing all of these, now we can go back to VS Code, and I want to display flex, and I want to justify the content, and here text center would be enough, but why not changing it to these? Okay, save, save. And waiting a moment, looks great, and looks great. Now we compare to what it should be. Oops. Well, nearly achieved, I would say. Not much else to do. So now, just looking at my script, we talked about the header box, we have made the responsive adjustment. Now it's the next, like we see here, this is kind of a rounded corner, which is kind of important to see. Here we have a rounded corner. So if I res sorry, if I resize, you see, this type of corner doesn't change, it's always the same, which is different compared to this thing here, because if I if I change the size, that's a good thing. Um, so because if I'm really good at hand drawing, one of my specialties. So what we can see, I mean, at least a bit, this kind of thing is changing. So that's why, because this is not a rounded corner, this is an eclipse, sorry, ellipse. Eclipse will be a little bit different, but also very interesting as a shape. Um, yeah, so starting with the rounded corners, and in our example, we still have this thing here. So let's get rid of it. We go to our shared folder where we find our main layout. This is something we can drop because it's not needed anymore. I want to move to the recycle bin. And technically, I don't need any of it anymore. So I just want to have a body inside our main layout. So we save it. And what we should see now is that we at least are where we want to be. In this case, now it's much more better. Now we're going to the rounded corners. And again, we start with structure. So back to player details page, we're introducing a div. This div should have the same background color. So we're introducing a class. And I want to create now a new class, a class from scratch. Let's call that upper header. And maybe it's a good idea to not use the class, but to put everything in one class. So upper header, I go into our app CS, I'm creating a new starting with a dot. I want to have the same background. And if you may wondering, are there better ways to define these kind of things? There are. They're not CSS anymore, but supersets. Anyway, So we want to have like a constant height of 30 pixel. And it's very interesting because I could say I want to have a border, and this border should have a radius. Let's say a radius of um, 30, 30, 0, 0. So what this means, like left, top right, right, bottom left. So I save everything what we have so far. I look at the results, or we have a look at the results, and we see we have now rounded corners. And just to make a better explanation of these values, yep, we can see our class. I make it a little bit bigger so we can see the impact um, of these corners. Because if I increase the value, we see only one is changing. And if I would add things here, you see now it's have everywhere corners. And yeah, changing something. Okay, so I'm just reading the page to get rid of the changes. So also done. Next thing, I mean, just to show it again. Next thing is these round eclipse here. While as I showed before, here we have always the same corner radius because we are using a border radius. Here's something different. What we're using here is a methodology called clip. So we still have a rectangle, but from this rectangle only a certain area can be seen. All other is clipped away. So let's start. We have an upper header and we will also have a lower header. So we're introducing a new div. We call class lower header. We going here app.cs.lower header. I want to have the same background, maybe high. And I prepared something here, which is called clip path. And the clip path, I want to have an ellipse, and which is these half, I mean, it's technically half ellipse. I mean, not really ellipse because the other thing is. Anyway, it's just a nice trick to, with these values, to create the kind of half circle or the long bow. I mean, it's not really a circle because half ellipse, let's say half ellipse. It's a thing. So lower header is finished. This is finished. We're saving it again. And just to remind you, we are nearly finished. I think there's a kind of different pattern here, but I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. It's the same thing. Okay, free. So you see, I still care. Anyway, now we have nearly. Maybe it's a 4. Maybe it's a 4. Ah. Anyway, you can see my troubling doing layout. I'm sometimes not really all these tiny things, not sure what to do and what result it has. Anyway, we finished the header, which is amazing. So now we're going just a little bit further with what we have done here. So let's start step by step. We're scrolling down. We have the container. To be honest, we don't need. We're starting to getting rid of the second thing, which should have enough. We also don't need these anymore. I just want. We don't need these anymore. We just are focusing on the card. So we are closing. Div closing. Phone book close. Phone book close. Should. should be. Okay, so this one is finished. This one is finished. Let's say start with a card. So as you can see, the card has a header, and the header should have a background of dark purple. And I created already dark purple, which is perfect. Background dark purple. You can see the kind of benefit of a class because we can reuse it um, different places. And I want to have like background light purple. Here we are. So, and I see now we'll see if I have enough divs. I think not. I think one is missing. So we have here card body, form group open, form group close, edit form close, one div for the body, another div. No, it was enough. It was enough. I confused myself successfully. So saving, building. Okay, colors are fine. What isn't fine is the placement. But with whatever we have learned so far, we could already guess how we should do it. So we create a new meaningless div and we put the card inside this div. I want to have display flags. It should be like a row. So we will see. I set to flags column, and maybe it's now a good exercise to see what does it change. Okay, I going full screen. So what would be different if I would say flex row? So flex row again, meaning we going all elements the cross the main axis is the horizontal line. Each element tries to occupy as less space as possible main on the main axis. So if we're saying row, the card is as small as possible, but it's not aligned. So I say align items center. Um, sorry, justify content. Justify justify content center. Because we are interested in the main axis and placement around the main axis. And this is justify, and this is always content. If we are interested in placing around the cross axis, we should use align items. Okay, so it's direct in the middle. It occupies still as less space as possible. And yeah, now we want to add a little bit of margin. So, but let's say I want to have y of 4, or maybe 5, maybe 5. Maybe 5 looks better. Not sure. So we can choose 5, you can choose 4. Um, I copy it, depends. So, okay, another step accomplished. So regarding our template, which is here, we are not so far away from it. Okay, next step is I would call it footer, but before we have demo card, we have colored, we have justified content. Perfect. Now we're going direct to the footer. And if you're looking at these both shapes, they are the same, but um, only rotated by 180 degree. Good thing we can do the same with CSS. So let's go ahead. Here we have our entire content. I create like a new div. I call this div like upper footer just to reuse some names. And I copy my upper header class. rename it to footer. And what I do now is like I want to transform the object and I want to perform a rotation of 180 degree. Saving. Okay, it seems like it hasn't rotated because oh, I copied the wrong one. I should have copied my lower header because the lower header is the other amazing. I stick to the transform, copy it, waiting for reload. Um, because we changed the CSS file, we need to reload the page manually. Here we are. Perfect. First thing accomplished. So next about the footer is like we have our start button here. And if I'm choosing an avatar with these nicely hand-drawn avatars by my wife, it's very amazing. Just to showcase some of them. So the footer content is basically a button to start and the avatar thing we had before. So jumping direct back to our player details where we create a new class and let's this class called footer, new div with the class of footer. Inside this div we want to have our button and I want to have what I've thrown away before I've prepared something. I want to have another div with I don't need card body anymore, I just need an image and I don't need this class anymore. Okay, so we are saving and just look what the results will be. So this is our goal. This is where we are. So, okay, it's not bad. There are some things which need to be done. For example, we forgot the background. This is pretty easy to fix. I haven't created a class footer, and I can add the background color. One possibility, or I choosing my class background color dark purple. Background color dark purple should be also applied here. I remove the class, snipping everything. And I'm choosing a picture. And I misspelled. Perfect. Okay, we have purple. I mean, there's still something to do, but we're starting with a button. So you could always mention it's like, again, display flags. I want to have a row, and I want to justify content center. Justify content center. Okay, and I want to inspect what this button has a class of button primary. And well, let's say what this button primary class is. This is actually the button primary class. So let's create a new one like button and to keys. It's a very unfair word. Ah, ooh, nearly right. It's great. Look, I can write things. Woohoo! But I think I missed something. Okay, and not only scrolling but also copy turkeys. So we want to have the same background color and we want to have the same border color. looking great. We can save and using button turkeys here. Sorry, here instead of primary, we want to have turquoise, and I want to have a little bit of margin here. So class, let's say my3. Perfect. Button is right in the middle. I have a little bit of margin. Now it's an interesting thing here. You can maybe see or not. If I would zoom in, here we have our name. It is not under the picture and it's not white. Both things we can fix easily. So let's say this is not only but also display flex. Now I want to have a column because things should be displayed um, under each other or above each other, whatever you call it. And these should have like a class text white. So let's see what it brings us. Now it's huge because it takes in every step we have. And what I can do now is like align items center. So column means cross axis is main axis is vertically, cross axis is horizontal, and I want that these items align centered based on the cross axis. So I said align items center. So now we are here. Again, the entire container, takes up the entire space. These here, not anymore. And we're getting there. We're getting there. So now it should be round and not as big as you think. So same approach. I creating a class. I call this class. I call this class player avatar. Player avatar, and I say something like height should be 100 pixel. And I want to. It's very interesting. I'm just starting with setting a high. Player avatar. And we're saving things. We're waiting for the results. So high is working perfectly. What doesn't really work is the width. If I can say width auto and spell out correctly, and I forgot something. Align items center. And to not forget it again, I just copy it here. So back to the picture. Here we are. We have our high and width, or I can also say both of 100 pixels because it should be a square. And to create this kind of circle, I can again use my border. What I say now, like border, sorry, border radius, border radius, border radius. Okay, what does this mean? If we would have not 50%, let's say 20%. So on each side, we would round 20% of the corner from the entire space. If we increase this value, eventually, let's start with 20. If I increase this value, we'll see how these small things become eventually round. And it doesn't make sense to have it huger than 50% because 2 times 50 is 100%. Anyway, so we can create this type of image. So what we need to know is border radius 50%. So let's copy it back to our style, and we're setting not only the height but also the width of an element. Now we have our player avatar finished. And we save everything what we have changed so far, taking a look. Okay, and back to here. I mean, different zoom levels, but we are pretty near. I realize now we forgot text to white FC card. Easy to fix. Um, card, 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 card. Text white. And save. And now spelling error. Classical. Text white. Okay. And okay. So there are few things here to notice. I just want to reload the page here. We have done 100 pixels. Styling button is done. Okay, so here we have a little bit more space under the button, and this is also not complicated. Just want to show you. It has nearly the same structure. Only I used here an element which has a padding. So if we would change it here to a padding as well, instead of a margin, you can see our div, which is empty because there is no image in it. If I would change it to a padding, we have a little bit more space. Maybe it's a good idea. I just want to change it to padding. Um, okay. So now we can say it's nearly looks the same thing, but one is different. We can see that this is not, if not every space here is occupied, there's a lot of free space at the end of the page, which is also true here, which is not true in our primary example. And I want to call this operation full height. So, and we're doing it by exploring all the different options we have here. Okay, so let's start. A document. I want to see elements. A document always starting with HTML. And if we can see, the HTML doesn't occupy the entire space of the screen. And we can easily change it by setting the height to 100%. So now the HTML occupies everything. Which doesn't occupy is the body. So now we have body like 100%. Okay, but again, not our container. And now we're starting, now we going here and playing around with something. So I want to add class display flags, and all elements inside should be placed as column. So, okay, looks different than expected. Because what's still missing is like we need to hide 100%. This thing. And display row, display column, display column. Oh, here I forgot to add Mhm. Edit HTML. I want to add a class which is called deflex. And I want to add 1 second. Okay, so back again. We have no, it's not needed. Okay, yeah, sorry, I confused myself. So body should be 100% high. In the body, we have everything what we need inside our app. So we say our app should be displayed as a column. And now it's interesting. I want to have display flags. I don't want to have high 100%. I want to have high 100% and class display flags. Anyway, um, I was afraid that some things like these would happen. So body should be like 100% high. Our class should be 100% high as well. But should position itself this way. Okay, so HTML 100%, body 100%, our app container 100%, and I really don't need it 100%. So what is interesting here, everything inside occupies as less space as possible. But we want that these things occupy as much space as given. And therefore we have the class flex fill. So, and flex fill, flex fill. So it should be display flex, and I want to have flex column. Flex column. Okay, so I want a flex column, and it's working here. So our app should be a flex column with all these elements displaying under each other. One of these elements, if you would say our main content, should be occupy as much space as there is. And if you can see, if I reducing the available space, this element will also reduce it, which is now interesting because it's very, very long. So let's just change a little bit here to saying I want that my items align items center. Now we have placed it vertically and horizontally right in the middle of our screen, occupying as much space as needed. Okay, and now after we applying all of these changes, now it's time to think where we need to apply it inside the source code. We start with our HTML page, which is inside the www root folder and index.html. Here we have head and body. And for both of them, we have on the third line inside our app CSS already applied things. So I say high 100%. The next step was body. Next step here was to set body also a high 100%. Nothing has changed. Now we go into our div class with so our div with the ID app, which is here. And I want to apply the class display flex, and I want to display flex column, display flex and flex column. I have not changed something until here, and I added flex fill. I added flex fill. So back to our players details page where our card is here. I added flex row, flex fill, and I added align item center. Align center. So we're changing a lot of files just to make sure it looks exactly the same when we are finished. And it doesn't. So usually we have forgot something, or in this case, I forgot something. So let's check. Um, Entire space, HTML, body occupy entire space. This class doesn't occupy entire space because I failed to set high to 100%. Or I just want to test the thing, just to, what if I would say class display flex, and I want to put it in a column so that it's occupy as much space as possible. And now I should, no. Interesting. Anyway, so read on the page, the error we made was entirely inside our app container ID. So here we are, should be like high 100%. So I could set it directly here, for example, because I've done it before, style high 100%. Save, reload, and now we are where we want to be. Okay, so first page finished. Let's see what the other pages looks like. Oh no, oh no, our button is not working anymore. Well, why? We have a submit button, but this, sorry, submit button here, but this button is not inside a form anymore. So we just move the form, well, let's say to the top level. I cut it, I paste it, and these, and these. So the button is now inside the form. I save, waiting for reload. Oh, not again. So what happened? The form here is inserted direct under our app thing. So what we could do, and what we need to do, is like we need to set high 100%. Wait. So, and what we done here, it should be also like added as HTML. I should have class. So I need the same type of container again. Okay. So you can see I have written the same thing here and here, exactly the same thing. So this would be a good idea to create a new CSS class. And let's say I want to call this class, should be full height. So what I've written so far, I've written height 100%. And if you look what this class display flex does, display flex, setting these, I remove important because it's not important. And flex column does these. So after creating this class, I want to apply it here. So we have not style anymore. I would use our existing classes and replace it with full high. And I would go to player details page to our edit form. And I would do the same thing here, class full high. Saving everything. Now, a little bit of fortune. It should look this way. Okay, fixed. And because now it's part, also validation is working, I can choose Fox ahead. And still the old style of the other pages. And well, now the good thing is, and I just go through my script, we have So after finishing our kind of first mission, like mission operation full high, now we're going directly into the next thing because we want to avoid to copy. I mean, we will copy, but we want to avoid copy important things. There's one concept in software program which is called dry. Don't repeat yourself. And if you copy a lot around your code, it's usually an indicator that you could do it more smarter. Um, so and Blazor give us a so-called component system. And with this component system, we can create reusable parts of UI. So let's do it. In our shared folder, we can create a new file and let's call it header, header.razor. And even if I said, I just start with copy our header. So think about it. Each page should have the same header. Um, so, but what will change is usually this content. So we need to introduce a code block here. And we need to do something which we maybe called, which is, I explain it soon, render fragment child content. I just want to explain what all of this means in context. So child content. I use a header, and this header should have so. Oh, I forgot an important thing. And this child content should be something which is usable by other components. That's why we decorate it with a parameter attribute. Saving. Still an error. Nope. Error. Child content. Spelled it different. Ah, okay. There is another issue. With .NET Watch, as soon as I add a new file, this file is not observed automatically. So I made the changes in the header, but I need to change kind of pre-existing file to trigger it. So important thing, what we have done here hasn't changed anything in the style. It's it's just a so-called refactoring process. We just change something not because we want more functionality, but we want to have cleaner code. So we introduced a new component, called it header. This component has one property which is called child content. Child content is like a default, is nothing else is specified here. The compiler assumes it should be the property, it should be the value of the property called child content. If I want to use a component inside another component in such a way, I just need to here, please print me whatever is my child content. And the result is now much more cleaner. Here, it's another thing. It's maybe it's tiny, but if you remember when we set up the kind of full high, we needed to add some classes here. So why not create a new component and call it maybe content page.razor? And this content page is nothing else than this div and closing div and child content. And because I'm very lazy and it's the same functionality, I copy it. So I copy to avoid copying again, which is kind of interesting. So having this in mind, we have now like page content, content page, page content, content page. I copy everything until the footer, except of one div. Here, I remove Okay. Ooh, should be if I. So let's save first. I haven't saved. So okay, nothing has changed again. Perfect. So basically, all components we create, it's as a kind of validation that our layout doesn't change, because then we had more functionality, because it's now easy to see we can reuse a lot of them by just copying them to the other pages. So, and if we are in our kind of component madness here, we just can create more components. I mean, we have created a components which is literally eight lines long. Oops. So we can also create a card. So let's create a card component. We say new file card.razor. We copy as a starting point our card. We getting rid. So we see in a card now we have like two things. We have a header and we have a content. So let's say I want to have a new code part. I still want to have public render fragment. Let's call it body or body. Sorry, body is different, something else. And I want to have something which I call header. So this should be our header. Yeah, our header. And this should be our body. Getting rid of these, getting rid of these. And one div is missing. Another div is missing. And I want to insert it here. So formatting works like a charm. I going back to this thing here where I have content page. I created a card. Our card should have a header. This header is create your profile. And this card has a body. A body. And this body is this thing. One div. One div. I don't need this card anymore. See two divs. I will hope it will format. Not as good as I hope, but better. We're saving all of the changes. And it still should look like the same. And it does. Which brings me back to our footer. So footer, 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 footer. So no div anymore. So we create a new component. We create a new component, and we call this component footer.razor. And all of this here, which is our footer, I copy it. We're starting again with our code block. Code. I forgot something. I forgot something. Okay. Again, we have like a kind of content here. So we have a kind of content here. So we have the same thing. Public render fragment child content. Get set, and it should be a parameter. Perfect. And I want to use it here. I want to use it here. And what I have here now, it's more like oh, I was so in that I haven't read the message. Sorry, chat message. What is the project today? We going today and making Blazor pretty. So we're doing a lot of CSS styling. We started from a very brief thing, and we are now here, and this is what it should be. So we have like a decent quiz with a lot of visual inputs and so on. Yeah, and welcome. Sorry, I was so into coding and explaining. Um, Yeah, thank you. CSS code. It's kind of, again, as I said at the beginning, it's kind of my arch enemy. CSS is, yeah, it's really something I have to remind myself that it's useful and also very efficient, but it's just me that I don't understand it fully. Um, and we are developing a quiz app. That's right, to kind of learning some technologies. Yeah. So CSS. So we have a child content, and what we have here now is like now it's not only a visual thing, but it's also something. It's also parameter, and now we need to have the player view model. So player view model player, because I want to use. Um, thank you. Yeah, I hope also it's. I mean, it's exciting. It's something. Again, yeah, it's sometimes complicated to get excited by all these CSS madness and things, and all these tiny things where you're finding out the right margin of things. Anyway, so instead of model, we're using player, 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 and with this parameter player model, now we can create a better component or a footer component, which has a player, and we bind to our model, and as our content, we have this, and now we can remove everything because we have our footer component. Yeah, and again, it's we are all here for learning. So if you have any questions, and or maybe also a brief summary what we have done so far, always asking. Sometimes I have, as I said, I still figure a good way to read the chat while being in the flow. But yeah, um, need a better place for my phone. Okay, so we have built now our footer component, and if we have done it right, there shouldn't be a difference what we have so far. So I can now choose here and have a totally reusable component. So again, why we have done this thing? We want to try to I mean, we want to try to not copy and paste everything. So that's why we're thinking about what is common, what will repeat on other pages too. And we figured out we have a header component, we have a kind of content page which makes the content vertically and horizontally aligned. And yeah, we have a card component, which is this. The card component has a header and something we can put in a body. And we figured out there's a footer, and this footer has a content, which is also in this case the buttons, and the kind of player profile chosen for the quiz. And to stick to the script because it's yeah because it's not easy for me to stay focused because I easily get lost in CSS. It's good to have a script. So what we have here is our current thing, and here we have what it should be. I just reload it. So we are pretty at the level we want to be. What's missing is the next part here, because it looks like, ugh. But the good thing is, because we have created all the components, we can do now something, we can do a kind of um, good or component-aware copy. I close all of these files to be not distracted by them, and go into our game where we have our game session page. And I want to display it side by side. So what we're doing now, we're applying the styles we have learned here to here. So I get rid of these. We need to have a header. So you can see how much code we could get rid of. Here we are. This is our question. Uh, 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 I need more space. So here we have our questions. And I want to display these as our heading. And here we can put the question in. It's not Visual Studio. It's like VS Code. It's similar but different. I mean, a lot of different things. Yeah. Oh, MATLAB. I remembered my study. Oh yeah. Good. Nice IDE. Okay, so we have our header. Our header has now this content. Instead of welcome, we have the current question with the question index and the text. So next thing would be the question itself, which is the input radio group here. So we don't need a card here, but we need to center the items. So I go in here and I just copy the edit form, putting it into here. And the good thing is I don't even need to create a new footer. I can completely copy it. All what I need to do is to change from model from to session, because last time, if you remember, we called our game session, and here I have my player view model. So, and here we had the edit form over the entire page. So we switch it here, we switch it here on the head, and we copy our class to our edit form. So hopefully with all of these in place, it can format properly. So maybe you have seen how much CSS and how much HTML we had before. Now it's not only far more readable, which is a totally effect on a totally different scale, but it's also much less code. And if we would change, for example, the header component, now there's one space where you can change it, and everywhere where it's used, it's updated automatically, which is great. So I save the page, I close the end because we don't need it side by side. And let's have a look what the effect is so far. So we can have a player name, I can choose an avatar, I can start the game. And you see from what we have before, like now, now it's this, which is great. So we have here still a button, we have here a button, and we need to think how can these look more like actually quiz things. So nothing which is not complicated. Here we have our buttons. So we move these buttons into the footer. We change primary to turquoise to stay in line. We can use all the logic we have done in our episode before. So not very new things. So sorry, forgot to save. Saving, player name, choosing an avatar, go to the next step. Now I can answer. Still, old style still applies and can go to the next question. Okay, amazing. So now think about these option buttons. There's a way to style them, but before we can style them, we need to get rid of the div, otherwise it wouldn't work. And we include a new div. And I call this div like answer container. We put it here and we put it here. And I prepared something, a toolbar. I named it toolbar. And I copy and then explain it. Wait, I've seen your question. I just want to finish this thought and then going back to you. Okay. Yep, this is what we are doing. So we want to give them a nice looking. So what we do, like we have to think. Now we have an input radio, an input of the type radio and a label. So first, what we do is like we want to display them, let's say, above and under each other. That's why we're using flex column. We don't want to see the radio buttons. So we just, using a trick, we set the opacity to 0, which means they are kind of invisible but still there. The label itself, we give them a block. We're setting a little bit of padding, a little bit of border radius to make it smooth, and a background color and background color. When we hover over the label, change the background color. And if we have checked the radio button, the next label should be having these background color. And I want to insert the option number or sentence option number. We already have this value, which is in our option index, because our option index starting with 0, we're starting now, we need to add 1. So we save all of these. And what we should see here, I enter my player name, I'm choosing this times this cat. So now we have two things. We can see the hover effect is working. We don't see any input elements here. And yeah, I can select them and I can enter. What I don't see anymore, okay, let me just finish the sentence. So what we have seen here, it's like we haven't really used these kind of background anymore. I will explain question later. I just want to finish these last tiny thing here. Okay, if you remember from last time, we created a function which gives us a CSS class based on if the select option is right or wrong. And we can use the same function, but this time not on the surrounding div element, this time on the label. So we add like set option background to option index, and we, 1 second. Yep, we said and we need to change, if you could look here at the class, we need to change the correct options. Correct options, correct options, correct options, correct options, correct options, correct options, correct options here. Now we don't maybe, maybe change maybe we don't change the background color, maybe we change the border color instead. We want to have like border color, border, let's say 8 pixel, a little bit thicker, solid of this color. And white is not needed anymore because it's already white, we're saving it. So your player name, I'm choosing something, Frog Superhead, answering the question. And now I still see what question was right and what question wasn't right. Okay, now to your question, why C# and not C++? This technology here is called Blazor. It is something new from Microsoft. And the basic idea is to use the same language you have in the front end to build same language you have in the back end to build the front end. That's why you're using C#. Blazor in this flavor, which is called WebAssembly or WebAssembly host, relies on a runtime, the classical .NET runtime, but is written in WebAssembly, and hence it can run in a browser. So, yeah. Question answered? Okay. So, color finished, color finished. That's the thing. So, what we see in the in the kind of template is this here. So we have like I think it's a better functionality for web application. I think in the C++ space there are also things like using Qt and web views, and I think again it's not my specialty, but yeah, it's a nice way to create web application with this kind of single page application where you have no reloads when you're doing something. Okay, so next thing, these kind of, let's say, status of quiz. I already prepared something from the HTML view of things. So we're going to the game session page. We going into our header, and now we have something like this, and I will explain it step by step. So we have an UL. UL is an unordered list. This unordered list shouldn't have any like bullet points. So we have list unstyled. It should be flex. The elements should be next to each other. So we're using a flex row. And it should be like there should be space between, or the space available between all items should be equally divided. And then at the beginning and the end also not some space. That's why it's called space around. Um, yeah. What we can see here, this is kind of Unicode representation of a dot. We have an Unicode representation of a check and so check mark, checkbox, and we have the Unicode representation of the X. So to show this type of progress, we need to remember the answers. We need to remember the answers and not only showing right or wrong just in the moment. So that's a great point because now we don't doing styling anymore. We're doing something which I would really call logic. Jumping direct into our game session. Our game session now will have something which is a dictionary. And in this dictionary we save an integer to a boolean and we call it answer. um, answer, not mapper. Looking for a name. Well, let's say answer mapper. Why not? And we want to have a new instance of it. So what is a dictionary? A dictionary is in other languages also called associative arrays. We can associate a Boolean value, so true or false, with an integer value, which is exactly what we have in this course. We have the index of the question, and the question is either right or wrong. And to the begin of a session, again, begin of a session is the constructor. We go now for each question we have, I want to answer mapper add index value false. So I assume every question is false from the beginning. I think it's quite reasonable to count. I want to add. It's quite reasonable to assume that. If the quiz is started, no question has been answered so far. So yeah, we inserting these. So we have here already kind of proclaimed that such a function will exist. And now it's relatively easy to develop. I want to return a Boolean. And what I want to do is like is has been answered correctly is now as an answer mapper add question index or just here, and I want to return this value. So important here is no one should have access to this value because it's something we do internally. If I mean someone, I always mean outside this class. So no one except this class itself should have access to the answer mapper. That's why we're setting it private. Again, if a session starts with the constructor, we initialize each element, so each index should have false. In this case, if the quiz was, for example, will be finished before or even before someone is answering, still false is good because we can say no correct answer is still a false answer. And in this method, where we want to check if the answer is correct or not, we just making a lookup. We say, well, what we have saved about question with index 1, oh, it was right or wrong, true or false. And then we returning this value. However, We set a value here with false. There's never a possibility to set any of these values to true. So we need also a method like submit answer, and having the same input like the question index, we creating is correct value, and it is correct if the answer index, if the answer index equals get current question dot correct option index. And then we do the same thing, but we're doing now like answer mapper at question index should be is correct. And now we need to call this function as soon as we have submitted the form, which is here. I want to submit the answer with my session submit answer, and I want to have my answer view model current answer dot chosen index. So saved. This was how it should look like. This is our new version, and we have Foxy ahead. It's kind of a small layout issue, but we have these things here, and just to see it's working, it's just not entirely what we would like to have. So functionality is working, but not the layout process. So let's check what we have done here. We have an H1, and above we have these, and display flags. Because row is the kind of normal state, we should have flags column, and now it's working. So flags column, if you remember, is not something we could set here. It's part of our header component. So we're going to go to our header component, and again, you can see also the value here. And what we need to add is like flags column. We're changing it, we're saving, closing, giving a little bit of time. And now we see exactly how it should look like. So, also finished. Yay. Now, last page. Last page, we haven't really started last page, but there's nothing we can't do with our knowledge and expertise now. So, we're going here, we're closing here, we're closing here, we're closing here. We're starting from the player details page, because again, we can now kind of very clever copying a lot of this value. But before, let's see how it should look like from a perspective here. I'm just going briefly through the quiz. So we have here something. We see now like right answers, wrong answers, how many of these answers, the percentage value of right, correct answers. And we see here like a little bit of, so we're taking like 19 seconds to complete, and some of the values too. So we call this result page, but in our first draft last time, we haven't really created any valuable reporting. So let's start by creating a report model. So we're going into game, and we're creating a new file. I want to call this file report view model. And because it's a game session report view model. Why view model? Because this thing, sorry, I just copy the name. I delete it because I wanted to create a new class. And why view model? Because no logic will be inside these class. It's only for messaging, for transporting data. So we see we need something like total questions. Questions. Get and set. We need something like correct answers. We need something like wrong answers. Oops. If you copy and paste, you should do it correctly. And that's some wrong. We need like wrong answers. Um, should be anyway. Wrong answers, correct answers, and we're looking now. Check, check. Is this something we can calculate based on both things? It seems like I forgot to using system. So now we create like, let's say it could be a fraction somehow. So we create a double, which is again the representation of a number with fractions. And I call it percentage of correct answers. And what I'm doing now, syntactically, I will explain it later, we're using math, which is a huge class providing a lot of things. I want to calculate. I want to multiply 100.0 with our correct answers and dividing by total questions. I'll make a line break. And I want to round these. I don't need these. And I want to round this to, let's say, two pieces, to two fractions. Okay, so this is called, just to throw a name into the room, is called lambda operator. So what we're doing is like we're creating a kind of property, but this property, unlike here, don't save any value. If it is called, it will execute these things. So, and this 0.0 is very important because if I would miss it, what will happen here? It's like 100 is an integer. Integer multiplied with an integer is still an integer. And an integer divided by another int stays an int. So we would have always like 0. Oh, no, not 0, because we would have like, think about, we have like 3 questions are correct, 3 questions are correct, and 4 are total. So we would have like 300 divided by 4, which is kind of accurate, but we wouldn't have fractions. So maybe we don't need fractions. It'd be much more easier. Anyway, anyway, so with if we're creating a double, double multiply with an integer as a double, and then we're doing like floating point division and not integer division. Okay, percent of answers. So back to our template. Finish, finish, finish. And these here, so we have, yep, check, 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 check. Duration is missing. Duration is the time span. So we have time span, and I call it duration. So what we created now is just the view model. It is, yeah, it's just a view model. So we need a place where we can create it. And our game session is the right place to be there. So we have, I want to have a report. So public game session. I want to switch it. Next episode, I want to create a report. It should be public gettable, but only private settable. Yeah. So, and that's a good thing. I want to create a report as soon if I don't have any other questions. So if my report is not set, I want to set a new report. Report is new report, game session report view model. And well, now it's about counting. Total questions is like questions dot count. That was easy. Now we can think about um, correct answers. We have our answer mapper, and all what I do to do is I need to count. I need to count which values are true. This is also a lot of syntax here. Um, Again, what we creating here is like it's also called lambda expressions. So we can create um, it's like a function. So please count each element inside this answer mapper where value has the value true. Again, value is from this dictionary. We call it usually like key value. And the same we can use, sorry, scroll. We could use the same thing for our wrong answers. Would be answer mapper count. I want to count all values, which has false. You could also argue, yeah, you if you have total and correct, wrong is also it's just easy to calculate. Yep, it's also true. Um, anyway, duration is interesting um, because we need to know when the quiz started. So we going back to our game session and we set private, and there's a datetime, like a timestamp, and we call it started. And when we start the session, we set started is datetime dot now. So the duration is nothing else than datetime dot now, so our current time minus our started time. So, and now we have our session. And with our session in mind, we can go now and styling our report. Go to our session, and we go to our report, results. I do the same thing again on the other side. I close these so we have more space. And I starting with a header. And I starting with a header. And I prepared already something because it's a lot of things to paste in there. Okay, this is our header. Looks like a lot of different stuff. So I have congratulations, which is like having two Unicode things like the cake and the other things. I want to in green display my correct answers, and I want to display in red my wrong answers. Sorry, sorry, I copied too much here. So, and everything around here is just styling to make it. As you can see, I want to as the text is left, but only if the screen is medium sized. Again, I want to have like two contents. They should be next to each other. And so I'm using a row, justify content, and only content in if a different thing is here. So I'm not saying it's not valuable. I'm just saying there's a lot of things to explain with not giving us so much value in this session here. So correct percentage was my last name. Now it's like percentage of correct answer. Yeah, things change, but it's not important. Okay, now we have our header. We can see and we need a card. Card is also content page card. I copy it here, so we need to close the body. We need to close the card. And we need to close the content page. Okay, what is inside the card? The card is like your result. It's header. So the body itself, it's like we already know our avatar. Avatar was part of the footer. And what we're doing now, I just close it. What we're doing now, inside our footer, we have here these, and I want to reuse it. So I'm creating a new component, which I call player avatar.razor. I copy it into, I entering a code block. I creating a kind of property public player view model, player view model, player. You could also use just the URL here, wouldn't be much of a difference. Um, but maybe later we will need more properties of the player. So it's fine. I replace it inside the footer. So I would say player avatar, where player is our own player. And self-closing element. So, because now I can use these also on our result page as body. And we have already seen it should be in the middle, so we're using container around. Should be display flags. We can say it should be a column, for instance. And that's why its column would be on cross-axis, so align items center. There we have our player in it. Okay. So session dot player. Yeah. Okay. So here we are. And we going now back to our player details page where we had our footer. So we go into results page, our footer. Footer is still the same thing, but now with two buttons. These buttons I can, and should be like primary. Primary, if you remember, was two keys because I can't write two keys. No, player details page because I can't write two keys correctly, properly, and should be secondary, for instance. And it's not model, it is session.player. And we can get rid of all of these and hope it's formatted well. Perfect. We saving it, all of it. How it should look like. This is ours. I just going through some question. At least one should be correct. Correct. So, okay. Too much copy and paste. We see a picture right in the middle. Makes sense. This should get we should here get rid. Perfect. Second button. Footer. Three buttons. Start game. We don't need it anymore. Okay. So finished. The last thing which is not working, which we haven't implemented, is these. So I'm just making one tiny step because I can't remember. Bootstrap field descriptive list is a kind of so-called descriptive list, which is these elements here. So inside the card body, we create a descriptive list. It should be on a row. And we want to display different values. And as I said, we try to not repeat ourselves as much as possible. And we already have learned there's a thing like a dictionary. So we can create just a dictionary which has strings and strings. We call it like report properties and creating a new instance. And now we say report properties dot add. I want to add, and because I'm pretty lazy, I want to add questions. And question should be session report total questions to string, because it should be a string and not a number anymore. String is something you can print on the screen. So next thing, correct, is like report correct answers. I just copy it again. Wrong, wrong. It's like wrong answers, which brings us to the last, which is duration. Duration. So duration is also a very interesting thing because it's a time span, and from time span as in daytime, there are, I would say, hundreds of thousands of different format strings, so C# times format. So we will see a lot of different explanations here, what type formats are, how we can use them. Oops, sorry, different key. How we can use them. Um, formatter. Many things to see, many things to see, many things to see. So what we are looking for is something like minutes and seconds. Here, numbers. So give me one, looking for a different. What is here? Here, I want to have like this thing. So we go into string, and instead of hours, we just need minutes and seconds. And so that this string is interpreted, yeah, as it should be. So we're just adding an add in front of everything. Duration. Um, yeah. So now we have these elements, and now I can say for each item inside our report properties, I want to display item.key, which is the property name, and item.value, which is this thing. Saving it. Going to here, starting our new game. And 8. Oh, it is default. Yay. Free rules. Yay. And now we see our result. One tiny thing. Picture is not centered. It's column. Yeah. It's a column. So we see it's as long here, small. So we need to align on the cross. So it's like justify items center. No, confused. Display flags. So display column should be flags column. So yeah, all my mistakes. So it's not display column, it's flags column. So align item center, everything's right. Yeah. So this is our report. 111 last and really tiny thing is if we want to play as another player, or if we want to try it again, thing is here, technically we have saved our answers. We can say we will just override it if we started, but I think it would be good to reset the counter here. So we go into our game session and we write a small tiny method which we call private void init news mapper and news init answer mapper. And we're doing it here. And before we say answer clear. So if there is already answers, throw it away and then insert everywhere a false to each question. So, and this method is also executed if we restart. So we're setting back the question index and we also setting back the answer mapper. So savings and done. I know it was a long ride until there and it was a lot. It is, but I think there's a lot of good things we can summarize from here. So we jumping back again. Before we jumping back, let's enjoy what we have done so far. I'm a player, and I can want to be a fox with a hat. I can answer a question. It's like a nice thing here. I can go to the next one. I see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. I can I see a nice report. I mean, we could add seconds or minutes here, right? Still improvements, also maybe some of the layout. And all again, it's working. Here's a thing. Last thing. Just to um, it should be like text center and text empty left. Yep, better. I just update our result page. Text empty left. Here should be this. Anyway, and I think this is something we can really be proud of because it's a lot and it's a decent look and mostly it was done entirely by using bootstrap and without really thinking a lot about other stuff. So again, a long episode, and I think it's now really time to wrap it up. So we're jumping back to our slides. Making it pretty. It was pretty long, right? So what we have done, BlazQ looks good, looks really good. We have seen the basic concept of responsive web design. Um, It's about having a kind of common layout, but based on the screen size, applying different values to different applying different values to different containers. For instance, on a large screen, it should consume 3 columns. On a small screen, it should consume 12 columns. So this is the basic concept of responsive web design. Mean, we have also seen components. Sorry, components are a great thing. If you remember the entire CSS we had at the entire HTML we had at the beginning, the long thing, we could reduce it to tiny components, which has expressive names, descriptive names, and we could easily use them on all other pages too. And I would say with these components, we can say less code with more output, so it's entirely efficient. Responsive web design, also seen in the last thing with these text centered and text left. Responsive web design, I think, is not an easy task. It can be really tricky. And as you may have also seen, a good design and good usability is a lot of work. And I would go so far that, um, and I would go so far that it's not necessarily a skill set of a software developer. I'm not saying there are not software developers who are great web designers and great web designers who are great software developers, but I think they are kind of distinguishable skill sets. And yeah, so long episode, long episode. And the good thing is really for the next episodes, and I mean with next episodes all upcoming, there will be only tiny things we have to do in layout process. So we won't do it ever again in these in these calls. Yeah. And I know sometimes I was not as confident as I could be, and I was in the other episodes. It's mainly because for me, it's not clear, but I really haven't seen the, and I think I understand it, but it's for me still not easy to explain. And that's why maybe it's also one reason why I'm creating this session is because I hope with this explanation, with this feedback, I can also uh, gain a better understanding in this layout thing. Again, no, the from the total, then we have also total different level. Why to putting it this way and why to use these colors this is definitely another thing, but at least from the technical perspective. So yeah, and really, it's not my expertise. Next, really looking forward to our couch co-op modes, and we have like really values into our quiz because we can play it with two and more persons on the same computer. Um, Next, we in the next or after our couch co-op, we will invest a lot of time in creating more game elements. We will using jokers. We will add multipliers. We will add timing issues. And when we have done all of these, it's ready to be deployed live to the internet so that you can play everywhere. Not with everyone. You still need to play on the same devices, but with everyone. And from then, it's all about multiplayer. So next episode, it's like we will start to acting on based on keyboard events, and we will answer the question. More players also means more logic. So I really, I mean, I enjoyed it in some ways. It was not as fun as other episodes, but I knew it before, and I was really struggling this week to find time to prepare and everything. Um, Next episode will definitely be much better, much more enjoyable, and we see us next week. See 11th February, 8 p.m. PST. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah, looking forward to seeing all of you again. And if you have time, there's a questionnaire. And yeah, as I said, I appreciate everything you've done so far. It's great to see that people watching these. It's great to see that I get feedback from some comments and co. And I mean, it's not only that I have fun with it and I learn a lot. I hope also you learn a lot and you see new perspectives and new possibilities. And in this sense, I've spoken a long time today, and now it's time to finishing everything up. Thank you very much. As I said, I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the next episode with all of you. So, yeah, have a good day. Bye.